Cloud. There you go. Joseph.
Oh, hello. Let me go to the views here. And hi, everybody. I'm happy to be here today. And we're sort of, I think we're on our 77th Salon, which is astonishing that we are at this today. I want to, a number of people in the Salon have asked me to speak about No Theater because I fortunately know something about it. And I'm really delighted today that my college friend Grady Harris is here, as you will see, because one of the things too about the Salon is that I'm doing, because we know each other now and we've been doing this a while and we've been handling, I'm doing a presentation I wouldn't give publicly. So I'm doing this a little differently. And one thing is I never talk about myself. I don't prefer to talk about myself. And so I prefer just to talk about the topic. But I think in this group, people might enjoy sort of hearing how did someone trained in classical ballet at the School of the Washington Ballet go from there to classical education at St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, to being the white guy studying No Theater in Japan? How did that even happen? And it is an interesting story because I went from high school into the School of the Washington Ballet into the Washington Ballet. So I didn't go to college right away out of high school. And I danced for a few years. And then I went to St. John's College in Annapolis, Maryland, which is the great book school. We read the great books of Western civilization using Socratic method for 4 years in a roughly chronological order. And some of you may know that earlier this year, I won an award, the William C. Mullen Award for innovative work in ancient culture. Bill Mullen was my Greek tutor at St. John's College. And when I went from performing classical ballet, and at this time, this was the late 70s, I didn't see a lot of 30-year-old men I wanted to turn into. There was nothing wrong with them, but they were uneducated. Dancers didn't get educated then. It was that simple. Yeah. And the men had shorter lifespans on stage than the women did usually. And so they went and did things, but I missed my education because I was really well educated as a child and really well educated in high school. And so I wanted to go back to education. So then when I heard about this Greek tragedy, here was this form that had architecture and social purpose and poetry and dancing and the gods and ancient culture woven into it all in one thing. And a lot of you may not know, but if Penelope was here, I know she's really into the classics. The Greek tragedies are written in scanned verse. Dun da da dun, dun da da dun, da dun da dun, ba bum 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 ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba 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 bum ba ba bum ba bum. That's how the poetry is written. It's written to be danced. So we know the dance rhythms. We've got the dance rhythms. If only somebody could figure them all out. Dr. Mullen was such a guy. He knew how to scan and recite ancient Greek poetry. And he knew how to do it with Pindar, who was the author of the Odes to the First Olympians. So Dr. Mullen said, look, if you choreograph some Aeschylus in ancient Greek, I'll teach you and the dancers how to recite it and dance it at the same time. So I worked with a small group and we choreographed and we performed a section of Aeschylus Oresteia on the campus, which had an amphitheater-like space there. But after getting that done, it really struck me that we don't know what they were doing. We don't know what the Greeks were doing because we don't have a connection to it. We've got some images. Aristotle wrote the Poetics 300 years after the tragic theater ended. That's the literature we have about it. And so I realized, like, wow, we lost our connection to our own Gnostic dancing. And I was really kind of bummed out about it. Now, our college is small. I think we had 96 kids in my graduating class. Now, Grady, I'm going to give you a chance to tell your version of this story, but this is my version of the story. I ran into Grady, who was a good friend anyway. Now, Grady and another friend, Marva Cox, they knew more about poetry than anybody I knew. They would be as likely to recommend a poet to you or a poem to you as recommend something, a film to watch. So I had these sort of two poetry experts that were my friends that really loved the life of poetry. And I ran into Grady outside of one of the buildings, and he said to me, I heard you were really upset when you found out that we don't know what Greek tragedy really was because we lost it. And then he had this little stack of books. And he said, but you know, in Japan, there's this thing called no theater. And it has architecture and social purpose, and it's multi-art, and it is dancing and poetry and performance all together. And they still do it. And Yeats wrote about it, and Pound wrote about it, and Fenollosa wrote about it. And here's some Yeats no plays, and here's some poems that Pound wrote about no, and here's some Fenollosa. And I was so happy to learn that there was an ancient multi-art form, the grandfather ancient form. And when I finished St. John's, I took a year off, and then I went to Japan on a scholarship for 6 months to study no, and I stayed there for 7 years. So it's no exaggeration to say that Grady Harris changed my life when he told me about Japanese no, because I was upset that we lost our connection. And until now, a lot of you, I'm kind of known as the Buddhist dance guy, but I was kind of the white no guy for a while because I was one of the few white people that had ever seen no plays. And I probably, maybe not, but probably seen more no plays than any white person in history. I've probably seen 500 or 600 no plays. I've seen so many of them. I lived in Japan and Kyoto for 7 years. So today, I'm going to share a no play with you, kind of walk you through it a little bit. And then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about certain aspects of no. There's so many things you can talk about that it's hard to pick which ones to talk about. Let's see, did that work?
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Let's see what's going on here.
It's only a partial image there.
How about?
Good play.
How about that?
There.
Now get rid of everybody.
Everybody mute yourselves, please.
Let me just escape this. I'm going to go to here. There we go. There we go. All right. There we go. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Mm-hmm.
It should be a partial mask.
Yes.
Great. All right. You're looking at a Japanese no mask. And the Japanese no theater is something that emerged in the 13th century. And so we're talking about the 1200s. The 13th century in a form called Saru, S-A-R-U, Gaku, G-A-K-U. Gaku means play, performance. So Saru Gaku. No comes from a tradition called Saru Gaku, which Alan was actually traveling performers, itinerant performance troops. And then there was a version of it called Sarugaku no, N-O-H. No, the word in Japanese means accomplishment, but it's only ever used to refer to this performance form, no theater. Now, Sarugaku no might have been different from Sarugaku according to a certain Chinese theory that's gained credibility in the last 30 years called Nuo, N-U-O, Nuo theory. It's a Chinese word nuo, and the Chinese word nuo means exorcism ceremony. But nuo as exorcism ceremony is an anthropological, a cultural survey sort of term. And nuo means exorcism in as much as something might be put out in front to protect you, to protect the edge of the city. You might put something there to stop the evil from coming in. or the more common understanding of exorcism that I could take something bad out from you. If you've got an evil spirit or you're possessed or there's an illness or sin, I can expiate the sin, I can take out the illness, I can take out the demon, and the exorcistic rite. Now, it's very interesting in the Chinese idea of nuo, and some people believe the word no is a corruption of the word nuo, is that they see this spanning all religions, all cultures, and they connect it to masked, danced exorcism ritual. Now, the No Theater is very much about exorcism, in as much as the way it's structured is a ghost appears to a priest, usually, and then the priest figures out who the ghost is, and the ghost usually is reliving a great love or a great battle or a great bit of tension in their life that they can't escape the wheel of life and death. And so now as I'm saying these words, look at this mask. Doesn't it take on different hues when you see some of the terms I've been using to describe the art form? One of the main figures you will see in the Japanese No Theater is a poetess named Komachi. She lived in the 11th century in the Heian era. She was famous for her beauty. In fact, if you say Komachi, it means the most beautiful woman in the world. It means Venus. Komachi was so beautiful. But in Japanese No Theater, there are more no plays about Komachi than anybody else. But the legend of Komachi, there's many different stories. And they have her living to be 100 years old, where she lost her beauty, she lost her wits, she lost her mind, but she became a Buddha, and she became more wise than the Zen monks who taunted her. And interestingly, in the Japanese no play, she's most often depicted at 100 years old. But today, we're going to look at a no play called Kayui Komachi, Komachi and the 100, and we'll see Komachi as a beautiful young woman. In this play, which was done in London, and I'm showing you this play because it was really well received. And for those of you who have seen Prajwal dance, you don't need an explanation to appreciate Prajwal dancing. The more you know, the more you can appreciate. But you can have a complete and rich and full experience watching Prajwal dance, even if you know nothing about Nepal. These performances, and this one I'm going to show you, was really a big hit in London. People were moved to tears by this performance. So I'm going to sort of walk it through you and let you see really how the drama works. Here we have Komachi, and look at her, she's so pretty, happy, upbeat, she's walking forward. Why, she's covered in flowers. I mean, what could be more beautiful than a beautiful, pretty girl? And she's got the landscape on her, wrapped in a landscape. She's all flowers, and she's got a beautiful flower basket. There's no flowers in it, but she's headed out. What could be lovelier than a beautiful young girl covered in flowers, out to get some flowers, and you see the drummers and the flute player in the back. Well, sure enough, Komachi runs into a traveling priest. And the priest says, well, sit down and tell me who you are. It's just such a lovely place here. Are you out gathering flowers? And she said, why, yes, I'm just out gathering flowers. And the priest says, well, isn't this the field where the great poetess Komachi first saw her lover, General Shosho, and all of nature sprung awake? And she wrote some of her most beautiful verses about nature and about love. And the girl says, I don't know. I'm just a simple girl picking flowers. And the priest says, well, I'm sure of it. I'm sure that this is the field where Komachi wrote about the flowers and the General Shosho. And at this point, the girl gets up and she starts to describe the flowers, and she starts to describe the land, and she starts to dance. And she starts reciting the poetry of Komachi from hundreds of years earlier as she dances in the flowers. And the priest is watching this and asking her, wait, how can you recite such sophisticated poetry so well if you're just a simple flower girl? And then he realizes, wait, you're no simple flower girl. You're the ghost of Ono no Komachi, the legendary poetess and beauty. And she says, yes, I am. I am none other than Komachi herself. And the priest is confused. Why? Why would the ghost of Komachi come back and be here? And she tells him, I am returning to this place of unrequited love because I saw the love of my life here. And then he came to court me, but I demanded that he visit me for 100 nights, every night consecutively for 99 nights. And if he did it 100 nights, I would receive him. But on the 99th night, his father grew ill. There was a terrible storm on the lake and he couldn't make it until after dawn. And I rejected him. I lost the love of my life because of my vanity and my cruelty. And for this sin, I cannot escape the wheel of life and death, doomed to repeating this pattern. But you are a priest and you have good purity, or you would not be on this pilgrimage. Our karma is tied, or we would not be having this conversation. Please pray, expiate my sin, free me from this, and let me realize Satori, Buddhist enlightenment, and join the void, and let this illusory version of myself fall away. And the priest says, I can do this. And he starts to rub his rosary to heal her of her sins and to free her to enlightenment. And just as she is about to attain enlightenment, something appears on the bridge called the Hashigakari, which is a 3-part bridge between heaven and earth, from the other dimension into this dimension of the flower field. And it's none other than her lover, the General Shosho, coming from the depths of hell. And he comes out and he says, wait a minute. If she gets enlightenment, I get enlightenment. And if I'm in hell, then she's in hell. And you can see how these frozen moments are absolutely riveting. And you have to understand that these actors are just emanating energy and deep spiritual states and the story and the character. And Shosho now gets to tell his story. And he says, I saw Komachi in this field and I wanted to court her, but she told me I had to come every night for 100 nights. I gave her my honor. I wanted to give her my family name. And on the 99th night, my father grew ill and the lake grew wild. And I tried to cross, but I couldn't get across in time when the sun rose. And I went to see her. And she threw away everything. And he throws his head on the ground. Now, this is like a Catholic priest dropping his chalice in the middle of Mass. For those of you that read Mishima, it's like when the teacup breaks. It's like all of culture. Nobody throws things on the floor in a no play. This was at the V&A. People were absolutely shell-shocked by this because it was very clear that this was a lover's spat. And he was angry and something broke. And this moment becomes dilated no play to the spiritual paralysis it became for these characters. And he says to her then, turning to her from the priest, I gave you everything. I gave you my heart. I wanted to bring you into my family. And you rejected it all. And his great line, the truth is not the phantom of your beauty. The truth is the agony of my soul. And this is where the actor fully reveals his mask to show the torment of the soul, of this legendary character now put into this Buddhist context of enlightenment and redemption. And so the priest says, it must be karma that we are all here together. And my purification must be strong, that I am here because I can enlighten both of you. I can exercise and expiate your sins for the both of you, so you will both attain enlightenment. Now, here's what's interesting and really profound. Komachi was cruel and vain. Shosho was passionate and angry. Well, if she was not passionate, if she was not vain, and he was not passionate, the obstacles to their union would be gone and they could be together, they could be married. And in this act of enlightenment, then they join the Buddhist void. So what happens here is so interesting dramaturgically. They stand next to each other. And then in place, they make one single pivot, 360-degree turn. So they turn around in place together until they're both facing front again. And here you see them, but now they're enlightened. So the obstacles that kept them apart are gone and they can be united as a spiritual marriage, but at the same moment they cease to exist. Because any personality, any old illusory self that was associated with the sin is gone. And now they participate in the Buddhist enlightenment and the void, and they no longer exist. So the end of this tragic tale is that they unite and cease to exist at the same moment. And here the stage goes quiet, save for the drums, the shamanic yelping in the drums. And the audience is now looking at actors who are acting about not being who they aren't. And they very slowly turn in complete silence, and they very slowly exit out the bridge to another dimension. And the audience does not applaud. They hold this powerful moment. The musicians get up and leave. The chorus gets up and leaves. And this is the end of the snow play. So I wanted to give you this walkthrough of Kayui Komachi that starts with a girl in a field and ends with an enlightenment that creates a cosmic marriage and dissolution of being at the same moment. And I can't think of many other theater forms that can even take that as a subject. I hope you enjoyed that, by the way. And now I'm going to give you some historical facts about the No Theater. No Theater is a multi-art dance theater form combining architecture, dance, music, chanting, ancient poetry, drama, mask, kimono, Buddhist verse, and Buddhist metaphysics. It's minimalist, but it is fully formal. And what that means is if you add 2 syllables less than a haiku, it wouldn't even be poetry. Much less building material, it wouldn't even be architecture. So it's really the moment where minimalism takes form is where no sort of exists. Now, what's interesting is that the shogun, Yoshimitsu, Ashikaga Yoshimitsu, who built this Ginkakuji Golden Pavilion, is also the shogun who founded and sponsored and patronized and elevated the No Theater. This dates to the 14th century. It still exists in Kyoto. I imagine some of you have been there. And I think this is the gilding has been redone, as you can see. But Ashikaga Yoshimitsu is responsible for the No Theater and for this, the Ginkakuji, the Golden Pavilion. For these things to last nearly 700 years is extraordinary. And part of the reason they lasted is the perfection of their forms. And the reason I'm showing you this picture of Mikata Shizuka as the young Atsumori is because look at how perfect this is. Atsumori rode on his horse through the waves. Look at the bottom of his costume. The waves are in his hakama. The clouds are in his kimono and the sun is in his fan. It's as if he is the landscape himself as he brings it forward. The point is that these forms were so perfect as they came to be in the 14th century, this combination of poetry and art and Zen Buddhism, that these forms have lasted 700 years. I want to mention that Yoshimitsu was 17 years old when he met Zeami, who was 9. A 9-year-old boy was performing, and the 17-year-old shogun, now the shogun is the military leader, the emperor is the royal leader. So if you've got a shogun in power, the military is in power. If you've got an emperor in power, then the royal family is in power. The shogun,
Hold on, I'll
No
get rid
problem.
of that. Sorry. Okay, sorry
Oh,
about
no.
that.
Not at all, not at all. Yoshimitsu was a successful general at 17 years old, if you can believe that. And he went to see this performance of Sarugaku no and saw this 9-year-old boy performing. Now, here is what is absolutely extraordinary. Now, the fact that the soldiers had boy companions is not news at all. But the fact that the leader of the country would have this boy sitting with him at social events and inviting him into the society of the court, and indeed encouraging this young, talented boy, like, elevate this form, elevate it with Buddhism, elevate it with the best poetry, elevate it with the best costumes. And he supported Zeami in this incredible education. But the fact that a 17-year-old shogun and a 9-year-old boy would meet each other and in fact be the right people in all of history to create the No Theater, and Zeami going on to become a great theorist, considered by some to be one of the greatest theorists of drama in the entire world, is really a remarkable thing to see that this relationship, which lasted their whole lives, would go to create forms that would last hundreds and hundreds of years. I want to share just a couple of the precedents to know. This is Bugaku, which I could talk to you about someday if you like. This is a Tang Dynasty form that goes 6th to the 8th century and is a conglomerate form. It's sort of a Silk Road form. It absorbed a lot of forms before it got to Japan, which is the only place where it's extant and still exists today. But this is a ceremonial, geomantic, polyglot form from China. This is Gigaku. And this might be, Ellen, the closest thing to vaudeville. Gigaku as a form is gone, but there are many masks left, especially in Nara, in the old temples in Nara. And in any ancient traveling show or puppet show, shadow puppet show, you've got removable parts. You can change the heads, you can change the hat, you can change what they hold in their hands. You can change, so a lot of these kinds of traveling theater masks are really meant as interchangeable parts. You can create a lot of different characters with this many jackets, this many wigs, this many masks. So it's not uncustomary to see, and yet you're seeing masks of prototypes that you will see all over Asia, certainly Central Asia and China, that these masks came all the way. So these are probably 4th or 5th century masks. This is called Dengaku, which is an agricultural form. And of course, most of the deities around agriculture are about fertility and growth. And so the No Theater has agricultural roots and ceremonial roots. And this is a very old form called Kowaka. And it's amazing this still exists. Kowaka is older than No, but this is a samurai storytelling form. Now, what's interesting about this is if you were a samurai, then you experienced death, because if you went out to fight, not everybody came back. So these performers called Kowaka performances, you can't see, they've got a fan in their right hand. It's closed, but they use fans, and they have these long pantaloons, these hakama. And what they do is they tell stories and they stamp at the corners, or they might open their fan. That's it. That's the extent of the movement. But the night before battle, co-waka performers would tell sad tales of loss in war as they walked around stamping to give drama and rhythm and form to the story. So these are some of the shapes of the forms that precede No theater. As you look at something as perfect as No and how it attained this, one of Zeami's original ideas was that before Yoshimitsu picked up Zeami and improved it, a lot of the No actors were sort of fake trance, selling a fake trance. Come and see a spirit possession. And Zeami objected to this, and he was like, well, if it's really a trance, you're going to lose your place in the art. And if it's not really a trance, then you're hustling the people. So Zeami tried to create an art form that he called a trance-like state, but not a trance where you would lose your ability to control it. So the No theater has an internal teaching as developed as the external teaching, and one about combining different levels of personal experience and depth of mind and communicating them to an audience through a huge costume and a wooden mask. This is no small feat as an artistic achievement. I wanted to end with a picture of Komachi at 100. This is from the play Sotoba Komachi. And it's interesting that the secret teachings of No weren't made public until the 20th century. They weren't compiled. They were all over the place in different families. And so it's interesting that the 20th century has become this time when secret teachings are brought out into the world. And it was when these secret teachings came out, they realized that Zeami was a great dramatic theorist. And he used poetry because poetry was based on nature. And if you had an emotional condition, you wouldn't talk about it yourself. You'd talk about the moon. You'd talk about the way the plum blossoms appeared, but you wouldn't talk directly. You'd talk indirectly using the imagery of nature to couch your emotions. Actors were instructed to lofty expression, and the shogun wanted Zeami to elevate this form. And so in some ways, they're open secrets. You could tell somebody that their quality of performing should be like snow in a silver bowl. But how many actors would know what to do with that kind of advice? So I just want to share with you today some of the beauty and the poetry and the lingering images of No theater. And I leave you with a line that is the end of many, many No plays. The ghost will appear and tell their story, tragic loss. And then the ghost will leave, and the priest will say the parting words. Like the dew on shady meadow mornings, she vanishes from sight. She vanishes from sight. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my little talk.
Wow. Wow, it's so much. Years ago, Joseph, in New York at Asia Society, they had a rotating exhibit of No theater costumes.
Oh, wow. Yep.
And I went in, I had to see it. I've never seen anything like that in my life.
I got a really good 2 years ago. The Cleveland Museum did just an astonishing exhibition on Shinto art, stuff that you can't even see in Japan, you could see in Cleveland. But there's a lot of other attributes, including costumes, masks, the architecture, the poetry itself, and absolutely the costumes are astonishingly beautiful.
Merle?
Joseph, that was fabulous. Thank you so much for putting this together. I'm curious about the training that's required of the performers, and how young do they start training? And I mean, I'm making analogies to what I know in the West, but I'm sure it's not.
No, I think so. It's not entirely hereditary, but there still are. And I just asked my friends, I think he said there are 15 or 16 hereditary families left. So if you've got a hereditary family, and I think Prajwal can attest to this, you grow up in it. So you learn a lot by growing up in it. But I think usually if you're in a hereditary family, man, they are sticks and bones about doing everything correctly because the family name is on the line. And so it's a double thing. But people can become no actors on their own. So there's a double thing, Merle. One is, it might have seemed like I gave a kind of lofty metaphysical explanation of the play, but most of the people going to the play would know that. They would know the play, they would know the famous poems in the play, they would know the spiritual action of the play. And you might have noticed that it's very posy, like you can see the psychological tension almost between the performers. And so you've got a group of people that study No so they can watch it. Okay, and they'll know how to do a dance, and they can know the chanting, and they can read the book. Sometimes they follow along reading the book while they're watching it. But then there's another thing, there are people that are studying it to be professional performers. And that is usually done on a one-to-one training, and the more serious ones become the uchi deshi, the live-in disciple. You get brought to live in with the headmasters. So a good No actor will have a No stage in his house. Maybe not a big one with a roof, but he'll have the whole floor in his house. So you can always go and practice there. So it's really gathered around the headmaster system now. The headmasters of different schools are how the students are taught. And anymore with an endangered form. I hate to use the word endangered, but in fact, almost all traditional forms are under some kind of threat. If you're going to go in to learn the form, you're going to have to learn how to manage it. It's one of the big things, like No actors and kabuki actors don't have managers and producers. They're their own managers and producers, but they're in the modern world. So they're used to performing things at their own theaters. So it's an entire system of training and audience building and using your own theaters, and families sort of come together to create a body of people that could be the next generation of No actors. Was that helpful?
Yeah.
I have a question. I always thought the oral, the singing, chanty aspect of No was coordinated with the dance element, the movement element, and that these were relatively fixed. What you're saying, I'm beginning to understand that maybe there's much more flexibility or much more spontaneity or interpretation in this. Am I right?
You nailed it. And I got to tell you, it's very interesting you said that, because just as an aside, I staged David Bowie's honeymoon performances in Kyoto. And among the performances were No performances. And he listened to the music and he went, variable time flow. And then he went back and he came back and he went, found rhythm. Okay. And then he went back and listened to it more and he went, it's in 8. And I'm like, yes, it's in 8. And then listened to it more with holes in it. Yes, it's in 8 with holes in it. Exactly. And it's like Prajwal teaching, it's in 7 and it's in 8. Yeah. Don't you see? Yeah. Yes. And so I remember David Bowie, it's like jazz in a way. Okay. And the thing is, like, it's in 8. It's actually in 8. But you've got two, Michael, you got 2 drummers and a flute player. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Real middle. So if one drummer hits on 1, 4, and 7, and the other drummer hits on 2, 5, and 8. And on every 3rd round, they come together on 3. So guess what? They stretch out 2. Okay, 2 starts to go until we all decide we're gonna hit 3, and then we go on to 4.
Mhm.
So the whole thing is swelling like this all the time. And although it's an 8, there is a dynamic that complexity theorists and fractal people picked up called Joha Q, introduction, faster breaking. Joha Q. I go like this,
Mhm. Mhm.
go like that. I go like this.
Mhm.
I go like that. I go like a wave. So Joha Q could be how you curate 5 plays over the course of a day. Joha Q could be how I lift my arm. So Joha Q is this pulsing wave that they believe is the fundamental dynamic of the universe, and incidentally is the same rhythm that DNA replicates. Okay, so this Joha Q is this fractal rhythm that goes through everything. So yes, it's an 8, but they swell out the things when nobody's playing. And they can use that to make these moments really poignant, like when you drop the head on the floor, you pop, drop. And you can make that silence so powerful.
Mhm.
Now, you said something interesting to Michael about the words, because one thing in no theater, yes, it's very much they do, and they do something that I just love, and that's this: they split the psyche. All right. So actually, when I told you that Komachi's like, I don't know any of the poems, and he's like, well, I think it's that, and then she gets up and she starts reciting the poems of Komachi, but she's speaking in first person. And she's like, now I'm going to go collect some flowers and put them in my basket. And then she goes on to dance, but the chorus starts to sing in first person. And after I get all my flowers into my basket, I will take them to my home. And I will. And so the chorus starts singing in first person while the dancer dances. And then at the end of the dance, the chorus is quiet and the actor speaks in first person again. So it's like there's different dimensions of the person speaking. It's really very, very interesting when you understand how the person is thrown around, and sometimes the chorus speaks for the shtei himself, for the main actor themselves. So yes, it is very precise, but you also go to hear it, how they're going to perform it differently every time. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that's yes. It's not for me, it's not as fixed. There's much more variability, but it's still recognizable.
Yeah.
But there's a degree, a very important degree of interpretation that's involved in the presentation.
Yeah, very much. And you know what? That picture of Komachi, that's a 56-year-old man playing a 15-year-old girl. And everybody's crying like, oh, that poor girl. It's like, and it's an old 60-year-old guy, And I've seen really old men play really young people in a very compelling way. So what I was trying to sort of point out by showing the actors as I was these forms, they really did attain a perfection that allowed them to continue, like Prajwal's forms. They've attained a perfection that just give the forms themselves teach.
Yes.
And so it's interesting, Michael, you talk about, because the actors will say, oh, you think it's going to die out? No, it's not going to die out. Why not? Because of the true art of no. Okay, it's because of the true art of no. What's the true art of no? Well, the true art of no is what you're talking about, Michael. The life that takes all those forms and makes it breathe again. And so I think that's kind of what transmission really is. It goes back to Merle's question about teaching. How do you breathe life into it?
I presume it's only male actors.
Well, I sent a little clip. One of the most famous actors, nicknamed the Antique, only had girls.
Oh.
And so he has taught his girls.
Oh.
And given the girls the same opportunities as the boys. And one of the girls really wants to be a professional no actor, and he's treating her just like a boy and telling her, hell no, you're not going anywhere. You get back inside and you practice and you go in there just like you would treat anybody. Just like you treat any young no actor chomping at the bit. No way, no way. But with the walking, the flower of youth, the most dangerous thing, the flower of youth, get back inside, go work some more, go learn some more. So he's really holding her back because she's good. So he's really giving her opportunity, and maybe this great actor giving his daughters this kind of opportunity could be one of the things that helps No continue.
Mhm.
It'll be interesting. Of course, the masks do help to allow a 60-year-old man to play a 15-year-old girl. And then you've got, of course, the
Also
voice.
timelessness of the character.
The voice. It's going to be interesting to see how this woman manages to play male characters. I'm sure she can get the male movements there, but she's going to have to figure out a way of having her voice project as male rather than female. But you never.
The way they chant, and I won't embarrass myself by doing it for you, but the way they chant is a very low resonant belly kind of chant. So it isn't like there is there's not like a gender on it. It's like there's more like a shamanism on it. You know, you can have a female shaman or a male shaman. They're both shamans. You know, can tell. So it's like there isn't like. It's very interesting that way. There isn't femininity and masculinity in that. That's not true. That's not true. In No, you always face forward. Okay, so it's like a river flowing. If I want to turn, I have to turn. I got to turn, and now I'll go this way, but not until I face that way. Okay, I don't ever move until I face that direction. So everything's in very clear lines. In a lot of traditional arts, you feminize by curving, and you curve and you cross. You curve and you cross to feminize. And in No theater, there's no curving and crossing. It's all very direct. So a woman's role is done smaller, smaller and more gently. There are certainly warriors that do martial arts with halberds and swords and knives, and they're all use fans. Now, anybody that uses a fan can kind of use it like a martial art. So I think that there isn't that much. It's not like you change. A male actor would use the same No voice for every character. All right, they wouldn't change their voice. They might change the way they chant the poetry, but they wouldn't I wouldn't do a higher pitch for a girl and lower pitch for a boy. I'd use the same chanting voice. So it's very otherworldly in that.
Joseph, you said that the story of Komachi was the most frequently told one in No theater. Is it always the same story, or are they telling different parts of her life?
No. And if we need to do this again in the spring, I'll do a 100-year-old Komachi play because I like the 100-year-old Komachi plays. No, and they don't all fit. Because like this play, she's a young woman, she's already dead, and she's stuck as a young ghost. But in other plays, she's not. She's 100 years old, sitting on a stupa, cursing people out. So it's like the stories of her legend don't all fit together. But they all
are all the stories around that central relationship with the lover, or are there other completely different aspects to life that are being told?
Completely different aspects. They're all different stories. Yeah, that's just one story. Yeah. So but Komachi at 100 is so interesting that you say, oh, this is the most beautiful woman in the world at 100 years old. Crazy and enlightened. And actually in her hometown of Ono, the village of Ono, she is enshrined as a Buddha from the 12th century on. She's been enshrined as a Buddha in the altar. So she is considered wise. And of their 8 immortal poets, she's the only woman among their Shakespeares of poetry. She's the only woman poet. So no, she lends to a lot of stories. Grady, do you have a question?
Joseph, speaking of Shakespeare, Is there an accepted body? You mentioned something about 500 different, performances, or are there apocrypha out there that some people perform and others disagree or as being original or?
Liz, great question. It's very interesting, and I was going to talk about it. You're onto something, the codification question of like ancient dance. I sometimes say I'm an ancient dance specialist because it doesn't mean anything at all. And then it's a quick introduction. You get in, you go right to the heart of the matter. But what makes an ancient dance? There are certain characteristics. One is the dance has survived political change. Politics have changed and the dance continued. The other is it survived changes in organizational structure. The way classical ballet is structured now is not the same as the court of Louis XIV. Different structure. The third is means of support. If a dance is an ancient dance, it's had various ways of supporting itself over the centuries. And then the last one is the way it's taught. So the way something is taught, a lot of the work we do with Buddhist monks now is help them change the way they teach stuff because not everybody's getting it. So now we're looking at changing didactics. So if you look at a long thing, but in the process of a long life of an ancient form, Liz, one thing that'll happen is somebody will come in and say, we've got to codify. We've got to make an encyclopedia of our knowledge. Or the government will say, we want to control this and know what's going on, or we want to know how many there are. When we were brought in at the end of the kingdom of Bhutan, the last 5 years of the monarchy, one of the jobs was, we want to know what dances are there. Tell us what's there. So we were brought in to categorize things. That's what we were brought in to do. So No was codified a couple of times. Once in the Tokugawa era and then before the 20th century. And those codifications sometimes start to classify. So there's women plays and warrior plays and insanity plays and demon plays. And those might not have been the categories 500 years ago. All right. It used to be the families did all of the work. And then it broke up. So the flute players were a guild, the drummers were a guild, the main actors were a guild, and the secondary actors were a guild. And then there were a bunch of guilds. And then it turned to headmasters of schools, different schools, like different sects of a religion. And so the ways of organizing it changed. So yes, they've been codified. However, people do know what Zeami wrote in the 14th century, and Zeami rewrote a lot of his father's plays from the 13th century. So we know a lot of those, and also some of them are just juicy old stories, okay? The story of Komachi and Shosho, that's not Buddhist, that's Shinto. That's in the 11th century Han era courts. Don't worry, we'll make them sinners. We'll turn the whole thing Buddhist. It'll work out great. And that's basically what happened, okay? And it was a way, but seriously, it was a way to reuse the poetry. The poetry became part of the script. So No theater and No plays are full of classical poetry, reused at just the right moment. And so No plays take these old stories and this construct of being unable to free yourself from the wheels of life and death that allows you to tell the story, that allows you to tell your story of the fight or the romance or whatever it was. But then it's put in a Buddhist context. So you get all the juicy drama of the sin, but you get the overall moral lesson of the Buddhist metaphysics. So it's what's kind of nice about the structure of them. And then finally, Liz, there is a really old bucolic version of No, deep in the mountains, that this one older Japanese woman patron sustains every year and pays for a performance every year. So there is this one rogue country school that's not one of the 5 official schools, and they do their thing. So yeah.
Shoma?
Hi, Joseph. It was wonderful.
Hey.
I just realized while you were talking, that story that you gave in this one is almost the prototype, because I knew Kurosawa uses a lot of No theater when he stages his movies. The story run, it's almost like this. A ghost comes, tells a version, another ghost comes, tells a different version. So in terms of movies nowadays, Are there any directors either in Japan or America who uses that concept of no? Because they're always borrowing.
It's a really good question. I'll tell you, I'll respond to it. I'm studying now because my next little article is about this, but I talked about this Chinese concept of nuo, N-U-O, okay? Nuo meaning exorcism, all right? So it's like exorcism. But when the Chinese academics and anthropologists say exorcism, they mean play, they mean drama, they mean masked dancing. So if you say exorcism, you mean drama. That's what you mean. And so the reason they do that is because they see this as transcending all these genres, transcending all these cultures, that everybody's got these things they do to protect the borders. We're going to put a god at the borders, and then we'll keep the evil away. Or if the evil gets in, we'll try to cast the evil out. Or if I need a message, a ghost comes and gives me the message. Well, I hope I speak ghost. And then you need a ghost. So in answer to your question, I kind of see it more like I see what they're getting at. They're getting at that sort of maybe there's a fundamental drama to ghosts. That if you have an interaction with a ghost, it is a drama. I sort of was thinking, Balanchine used to say, they were asked if his ballets had stories, and he said, I have a man, I have a woman, I have music, I have a story. You know what I mean? I'm done. But I sort of think, you have a ghost and you have a priest, you have a story. I mean, there's something's got to give, something's got to happen there, you know? So I think once the ghost shows up, you know, and the most famous ghost movie was that Ghost movie, wasn't it? With Whoopi Goldberg. She was a ghost. Okay, but the problem was they couldn't get the lovers screwed up. That was the same thing. She was trying to heal that lover's rift in that film, you know, that she played a ghost. So I don't know, but I do agree with you, not just Kurosawa, but there's another great filmmaker who used a lot of old Japanese legends and instruments. And when I think of it, I'll tell you. So I don't know specifically, Shoma, but I do think it's very interesting. I'm at my old age, I'm reconceiving my ideas about the role of ghosts in drama, you know, and.
No, because I think her poem, in context of what you said, that they made her a Buddha, if you look back on some of her poems, I just remember one of them, like one line, this body is the sake that you left. I think it's one of the famous ones that she had written, because they're all around that love affair.
Yeah.
It almost tied up perfectly with the concept of nirvana, that the body is just, you just leave it. In the context of Buddhism, it fits really well. I think now.
Yeah, very much so. And so it's like these ghosts are really sophisticated. You know, they come back speaking this beautiful poetry. And very much the poetry, because it's couched in nature. Anyway, there's a location or a site that's really specific to the play. But that's a really good question. We need some more movies like that. Hey, Sharon.
That's a very fascinating about all the poetry. I mean, the Mahasiddhas, they have hundreds of poetry. We are using some of the poetry as the movement, as the visualization, as the nature, as the reality, and bringing as the movement. Like, for example, Mahasiddha has written that in the mountains, when they walk in the mountains, then the wind hit to the trees, and the trees fall down, and the dancings around that in the airs, and they move around, and then dissolving into the art or nature. When you hear that poetry, it's just like you can easily visualize, and you can just move like your entire whole body is start to like moving, like internal dancing. I mean, for me, like that's just like every body can make it that your own dance. So there must be some connections with that. It's in the the 1,000 years traditions, which is like a noble and ancient traditions in the Nepal's, or I don't know. There must be connection with for me it must be connection. And also the Nobo is very slow. It's like a Tai Chi, it's a Qigong. Every single moment have the meanings, and every single step have a very precise and very awareness and very, such a touch and such a feelings, like you can just want to be gazed. You don't want to miss any single moment, or you don't want to be in blink to miss the moment, So, I mean, that is the powers of the energy is there in every moment. So there must be the really profound, ancient, spirituality also. I mean, they is already spirituality, but it just have so much powerful to move with that way. So,
Prajwal, I completely agree with you. And I wonder if that power might have come through the Silk Road and the Bugaku and all of that stuff that came through, because I think it is this combination of things. But I just want to point out, because this was the thing I'd written down, as Prajwal sitting underneath that mandala. For example, if I want to put a chakra here and a globe here and a globe here and a globe here and a globe here and a globe, I can put globes inside my body. Okay, I can do that if I want to. I can do chakra. I can turn all the globes into lotuses. Now I've got 7 lotuses in my body. Okay, so, or I can put geometry. I can put the Kabbalah tree of life in my body. It's geometry. I can put geometry in my body if I want. Now, Prajwal, what's so interesting about the way you divinize the body when you teach Charya, how you use words to make the body become divine. And in the No Theater, it's very poetic teachings. It's not geometry. Hey, Grady, see you, buddy. Thank you. It's not geometry in No Theater. It's this natural poetry that they use to create the Zen moments, which is this moment that pierces through reality. So it's interesting what you can put on the inside of your body. Taoists put whole landscapes on the inside of your body. Tantrikas put geometry on the inside of your body. There's a lot of different things you can put on the inside of your body as a visualization. So it's interesting because the No Theater, one of the techniques in No, that's just a basic, like a plie kind of, is called Mokuzen Shingo. And what it means is I'm supposed to see myself from the back all the time. Now go do everything else. Okay? But don't stop seeing yourself from the back all the time. So one of the qualities they teach No actors is to always know what you look like 360. Now, Mara, you do tango. You know what you look like 360. It's not a 2D dance. It's a very 3D dance. But a lot of dances are done in such a way that you really don't have a 360 of your body. And the No Theater starts each by saying, no, that's the beginning. See yourself from the back. What do you look like from the back? And so even these teachings about taking yourself outside of your body to internalize it are also part of the techniques of the No Theater. I think you're right, Prajwal. I really do.
Great. Yeah, it's very fascinating always, the ancient tradition, it's very fascinating. So that is, yeah.
Joseph, you have enthralled us all. I think everybody is just caught up in the beauty and in the passion of your description of all of this, which is just great. The question I have for you is, so how in the contemporary Japanese world today, where does No stand? Is it a popular medium? Is it something young people flock to? Is it something where there are reviews in the paper? Is it, how alive is it? Or is it a small group of people who really know what's going on, who are keeping it alive and cherishing it? Or is it broader than that?
And then what did COVID do to it? P.S.
Right.
So I talked to my friends when they did this performance with their children last year, and I asked them these questions. When I lived in Japan, it was the richest country in the world, and it was I was there from 85 to 92. And then it was like the traditional arts. Mikata was in fashion magazines, eligible bachelor. You take your girlfriend to a Torchlight No performance. Who cares if anybody understood it? There were, and there may still be, No actors that do motorcycle tours through Japan. And they stop and they do a No play at the campsite. And they go to the next one and do another one. I would love to do that. But the question is, because, like I was saying earlier, they've got their own little system of No theaters that are owned. It's not like they're in that sort of a situation where we're worried about a production house, but now just getting people to come and be interested in it after COVID is tricky. There's no question about it. I'm always impressed with young people because stars in their eyes is stars in their eyes. They don't see less than what we had. They just see the world and they're excited about it. So Mikata's children are excited about the future. And she's like, let me at it, let me on social media. And he's like, no. But she's very confident that she can get a lot of people interested in it. So right now, that's one of the big issues is where does the money come in from the government? And they're not funded like a government ancient art preservation thing. They're not funded like that. They make most of their money from ticket sales and people making gifts to them in the old sensei manner where you give your sensei gifts. So that's how it's sustaining. Wildly popular, no. It goes up and down in the popular media. It might be more known if they do a torchlight performance once a year someplace, or they use an old stage, that kind of thing, people would come and see it. But the finances don't all tie into the performance, they tie into the teaching and everything else. So they do not believe no is on its last legs. They think like anything else, it's fighting for attention. And like anything else, people have asked me too, well, what's your idea of success in dance preservation? Is the next generation there or not? If they're there, that's all you can say. You can't promise 2 generations, but you can say, I can see the next one. And right now, no actors can see the next generation. All right, how they'll be able to do it, or if there'll be enough work so that maybe the lead actors will make a living and the secondary actors will have part-time jobs and do no. Gagaku and Bugaku. Now the imperial household in Japan, they have a professional Gagaku troupe and musicians. But in most of the rest of Japan, Gagaku dancers and Bugaku dancers do other things too. They come together for the ceremonial performances. So it's a really good question. And I've learned too, tempering my passion, you can't just meet all these, when is your form gonna die? And when's your form gonna die? That's certainly not how a living practitioner is thinking of it. They're like, damn, aren't I doing good? Didn't you see my last show? It was good. So I think this is why I'm tempted at some point to write on the true art of no. Because what they'll all say, as long as the true art of no, as long as one actor has the true art of no, we can all relax. And so I would kind of like to explain, it's a good transmission question. Hey, Sharon, did you have a question? You've been so patient.
Yes, I just wanted to make a very small side parallel that you mentioned that in the concept of the play that you so beautifully explained, their emotions, their malechas, their negative emotions were keeping them from enlightenment and therefore achieving non-duality. And so just a parallel would be the 12th century poetry of Jayadev, the Gita Govinda, which is the only poetry that was sung in Jagannath Puri. Now, the music that went with the poetry that they danced to, we don't have, so there's new music with it. But the whole concept is that you have, in a particular place in nature, on a particular night, which lasts eternally, or 6 months, when Radha is told, take Krishna by the hand and take him through the dark forest. So it could be imagination, it could be real, etc. But in the entire 24 cantos of yearning, preparation, anticipation, going, love, disappointment, betrayal, reconciliation, the essence is that until Radha, who is beautiful and wonderful and almost perfect, gives up her self-centered ego to feel that she can have the divine exclusively, when she only after she gives that up, which she hates to hurt her, but has to make her understand that he has to be with the others as well. That's when they have the ultimate non-duality union and become Radha Shyam, which is actually a concept that only came up around the 6th or 8th century. But the point is, in Git Govinda, there are many people who simply enjoy, like in various aspects of the plays on this heroine, different aspects of the bliss, of the love, etc. But the ultimate point of it is that you achieve non-duality and ultimate union of the self with the divine, or the soul, the Atma with the divine, only when you give up the ego, the final thing that prevents you from that. And so that's just an essential thing too.
Yeah.
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 Just
No,
a side note.
but beautiful, because it's a beautiful way of parsing that story. And as Prajwal is saying, who knows the undercurrents of culture? What story gets picked up and retold? What is story about the most impossibly beautiful woman? Well, almost every culture's got a story about a woman who's so beautiful they went to war for her. She was so beautiful, and they have a way of trying to. So it's very interesting to see how these stories might have grown and morphed. It's very interesting. Michael, are you speaking? I can't hear you. Michael, I can't hear you.
How's
Are you?
that?
There you go.
That makes me wonder what Sharon was talking about. The integration of a religion and the theater. If a lot of what is being done in the theater is a transmutation or transformation of some religious undercurrent, that really is the cultural core of what you're talking about.
Very much. A tea ceremony would be the same thing.
Yeah.
I would think, that the undercurrents of tea ceremony was Zen Buddhism, and actual Zen Buddhism, the realization that comes with Zen Buddhism. So yeah, I would agree with you that is that was the culture. It was the culture of the time. And in fact, it was Yoshimitsu, the 17-year-old shogun, who picked up Zeami and said, elevate your art. I will do everything for you. I will make everything available to you. Elevate this art. And he did elevate the art. And it was really for an aristocratic audience. And one of the ways they showed their pleasure was they gave robes. So the aristocratic robes of the Muromachi era are pretty much the costumes of no theater.
Could something be something? I'm trying to get this into my head. The dance, the separation of the dance, the movement, and the spoken word. Could you address that a little bit more? I mean, because I find the dance, the movement is so, I could almost go to sleep watching it.
Hypnotic.
Yes. Could you address that just a little bit more?
I can't, sure. They're basically two kinds. There's sort of standing and declaiming, and then there's moving and speaking, and moving and not speaking. And as Prajwal pointed out, no is very, very slow.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you've got to hold a lot of things, and Prajwal, that's the most difficult thing about learning your dance. There's so much to do to put all that together, that it is a lot to do. And one of the reasons you move so slowly is it allows you to keep that consciousness together. If you move much more quickly, you just can't do that. A ballet dancer just cannot keep that frame of mind. You're too physical. It's impossible to do it, moving that quickly. So there's an element of that. The other thing is too that these places where it splits in the chorus, you see there's a big chorus there, 8 or 10 or 12 people. So it's a strong, powerful chorus that's singing too. It's a loud voice. They will also chant while there's dancing going on. They will also chant while somebody's standing there or sitting there too, just tell the story. And they have different roles. And so there might be a time when the chorus is chanting and a dancer is dancing. And sometimes there's a back and forth between the chorus and the actor. When I first started studying No, my No master used to tell everybody, fall asleep. Because then when you wake up, it's like a dream, and it really is like a dream. And you're like, wow, you can just really, really get into it. So he encouraged everybody, if you're gonna, it's like meditation. A lot of people, when they try to learn how to meditate, they fall asleep a lot. Well, you're on your way. If you're falling asleep, that's headed the right direction. You know, it's better than cheerleading, you know? So actually, it's kind of like falling asleep in meditation. And the other thing, I don't know if you noticed there, Michael, did you see where that people's heads were in the audience?
Mhm.
You
Not at
saw,
all.
well, in a real no play situation, the stage is about 3 feet high
Yes, yes,
and the people sit on the ground. So everything takes place right here,
eye level,
third eye level.
third eye level, okay.
Okay, everything is taking place right at your third eye. It's like it's like a visualization right in front. It's an empty cube. That's what a no stage is. So you're looking at an empty cube and all this stuff happening right in front of your third eye.
Mhm.
And so that's how no plays happen. And and it's a dark stage, usually in outdoor natural lighting. So it's in all of this is intentional. So when you start putting stuff on proscenium stages or giving people comfortable seats or all those other things, you change part of the dynamic of the performance and the perception.
Mhm.
Because in fact, it does happen here and it is hypnotic. There's no
Yeah.
question about it. It's absolutely hypnotic. Yeah.
Isn't the slowness of no akin to charm? Because they move so slowly also. Because the
Mhm.
whole point is it's almost like a darshan. You accrue karma by watching these dances. Isn't that a big part of all that stuff?
Interesting. Well, Cham does get pretty wild and Cham spins a lot. Cham spins both ways. So the thing is, if I'm going to spin both ways, that's a very physical thing because you've really got to change your horsepower the other way. So Cham actually gets pretty, you know, they stomp around a lot.
Doesn't it also go over many days and parts of it are very, very, very slow? You have to,
So parts of it are stopped even. Some Cham dances have stops in them where the whole dance comes to a standstill. So yeah, absolutely. But it's not the same level of sustained slowness like a no play.
Okay.
And part of that too is because it's like I say, it's a roofed empty cube. And Cham is usually in an outdoor courtyard, makes you dance a little horsier, I think, than putting that thing all down in the concentration for you, you know, right in this nice box to give you this perfect jewel of a performer. So yeah, but the tempo question is an interesting aspect.
Very, I find it fascinating.
I guess if you're focused, I'm just thinking through what you're saying. If you're totally focused, the emptiness won't matter. You'll be home focused on that little moment. Everything becomes a square stage. You won't need that setting. You'll create it in your mind anyway.
I wonder if you're right about that. Yeah, because I think it is a kind of a prefiguring of that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Which kind of goes back to what Prajwal was saying. How old is this? You know, the Tabo sculptures in our Mudra project, I'm very interested in where they are on the wall compared to the seated guys. They're about here, they're a little higher. All right. So the monks who are going to visualize these statues, the statues are like here. You know, I'm wondering, what is this relationship of the statue? What's the relationship of the stage to the observer who's really having this experience? And the thing that's interesting, one of the things my no master you taught me, and I'd say, what am I supposed to be doing here? He'd say, wait. And I was like, wait. He said, no, wait with the audience. You wait with the audience together. You're waiting with the audience. Same breath. So you and the audience are waiting together. What are you waiting for? You're a priest, anything. You don't know. You don't know what's going to come out from behind that pine tree. You're on a pilgrimage. God only knows. You're waiting with the audience. These are really great things to learn. And he told me too, one time I had this one role where I was in a low crouched kneeling position. And he told me, he said, I want you to stay in that position and out dance the lead actor who's dancing.
Mm.
Which is kind of a Buto thing to say. But those are some of the teachings of No about emanation. You know, there's a lot of energy emanation because you're not expressing with your face or with your gestures so much. So
Joseph, thank you, thank you. And you're always so brilliant and wonderful.
And informative.
Yep.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot to say about no, and if you ever need a no day, we can do 100-year-old Komachi story. They're my favorite. I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot to say about no. And it's a pleasure to share it with people because it's one of the things I really like, I really love.
You know, because it's always been static for me because I've never seen live performance. And I assure you, I'd be asleep and meditating quite quickly. So,
Yeah.
But, you know, you've opened some doors for me, some entry points, and you've made it accessible as you always do.
I'm glad. Thank you. Thank you for this great salon, Barbara. Best thing in everybody's
Well,
life.
I have assignments because for next week, come up with a topic that all of us can kind of share. You know, what do we want to know about each other? What is a favorite object in our house and why? What do we have in our homes that do emanate? So get creative, and that's what we'll do next week. Love
Okay.
you all, and guests, it was marvelous having you.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, it was wonderful.
Hello,
Bye,
Sharon.
all.
Nice to join you. Alan, where are you? What's your
Where am I? I'm in Evanston.
Evanston? Doing what?
Oh, boy. And you're in Delhi?
No, at the moment I'm in San Diego. I've been in about 12 places around the US in the last couple months as a COVID refugee. I'll be back to Delhi.
Oh,
But not
my.
Chicago. You should come to Chicago.
I was in Chicago. I'm sorry.
Ah,
My cousins are there. I saw Joseph.
Amazing. Well, Joseph, you didn't know that Sharon and I know each other.
It's a small world. I should assume. You too, I should assume. You know?
Come back.
Yeah, come
Now
back.
I'm doing the West Coast. I finished Hawaii. Now I'm San Diego, LA, San Francisco. I'm waiting for Singapore to open so I can go visit my grandson. And if they don't, I'll just go back to Delhi. Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
we'll see you in Delhi if we're ever able to go back to India.
Oh,
Absolutely, absolutely. I have a guest room. You're all welcome. And thank you. Thank you. I enjoyed the salon and this was lovely.
take care, everyone.
All right.
Be safe.
Bye.
Salute.